and welcome to my tutorial on the complete process of making a cartoon-like picture, from sketch to color to shading and lighting. So, open up a new file. I'm going with a square canvas for this, 2500 by 2500. Choose whatever size you want either by manually typing in the size, or you can choose from the drop-down list of preset sizes, and click Create. Part 1. Importing a reference picture. If you want to import a reference picture, there are a few ways to do it. You can use the pin tool to place a reference picture which you can move onto and outside of the canvas. To do this, click on the pin tool, then go to Tool Options. Click on the plus button and browse your PC for the file. I've gone for a generic royalty-free fighting pose picture, taken from the website Pixabay, which I'm going to turn into Chun-Li from Street Fighter. You can adjust the size by clicking on the corners and dragging, and you can move it about by clicking in the middle and dragging. If you want to place a picture onto your canvas as a layer, you can import it by going to File, Import Animation Frames, Add Frames, select the picture from your PC, and click OK. This is now on its own layer. You can also do this by right-clicking on the picture, copy, and in Krita go to Edit, Paste. Right, so you can move this picture about using the Move tool or the Transform tool to resize. Click on the corner and drag. To make sure it doesn't warp when resizing, press and hold Shift while you drag. To move about, click in the middle and drag. If you want to draw over the picture to get your sizing and dimensions the same, you can lower the opacity by making sure the layer is selected, then click on the opacity bar to change it. You can hold the click and drag it or just click on the line where you want it to be. If you don't want the reference as a layer, you can drag the pinned picture over the canvas if you want to draw around it and move it back after you have a rough sketch. Part 2. Sketching. So let's start our sketch. Go on a new layer and double-click to rename it. Make sure your sketch layer is above the reference picture layer so you can see it over the top. I've chosen the pencil brush for this. Make sure you have the brush tool selected as well. Adjust the color you want to sketch in by clicking and dragging on the color wheel. Now, as Chun-Li looks different to this character, I'm going to use the pose as a quick and easy reference but change the details to match Chun-Li's hair and outfit. I want to change the shape and position of this foot, as I don't like the way it's bending backwards and it looks like the leg is a little too long. So what I'm doing here is using the freehand selection tool to isolate the foot. I want to warp the foot so the toe would be pointing more towards the camera than in the bottom left corner. After I've selected the area, I click on the Transform tool to move and reshape. To warp the perspective, press and hold Alt when moving the sides. This will tilt the picture in a 3D way instead of squashing it sideways. Now I'm finished adjusting the foot. To deselect the area, simply click once with any of the selection tools active. I prefer one of the shape tools as I'm less likely to accidentally draw a tiny freehand circle and then wonder why none of my brushes seem to be working. To stop the reference picture layer from showing, click on the eye icon next to it and will become invisible. Have a look at your sketch now and tinker to get it how you want. I'm still not liking that foot as it shouldn't bend that far back, so I'm going to adjust. To better see this foot and adjust the angle, you can rotate the canvas by pressing Shift and Space together and clicking and dragging the canvas around. To snap back to center, press 5. Don't forget, if you want to move something instead of erasing and redrawing, you can use the Selection tool, and then the Move or Transform tool to adjust position and/or size. Go back to the Selection tool and do a single click to deselect. Part 3. Line Art. Now we're happy with the sketch, time to do the line art. Create a new layer by pressing the plus button at the bottom of the layer docker. Use the arrows or drag and drop to make sure it's on top of the sketch. To rename the layer, double-click on the text. I'm going to make my sketch layer 50% opacity so I can see my lines on top of it. Select the pen brush you want to do your inks with. I like this pen because it tapers off at the ends and reacts well to pressure, so I don't need to adjust the overall pen size for thicker or thinner lines as I'm drawing. Select the overall size before you begin. Part 4. Coloring. It's best to put your colors on a separate layer which is underneath the ink layer. So like before, click on the plus button, rename your layer, and make sure it's below the ink one. Have a play about to get the colors you want. So there are different methods you can use to color. One is by doing it manually, just color by hand like so. A quicker way is to use the bucket tool. This will fill large areas which are contained within closed lines. There are a couple of settings to consider when using the bucket tool, which I will show you with these 3 circles. The main settings to look at are grow, and these layers buttons here. The grow selection is how many pixels you want the area to grow by. When you color under the ink layer, you want it to grow by at least 1 pixel so it cleanly covers the whole area. If we set it to 0 growth, you can see what happens. When I zoom in, you can see there's a narrow white line, where the color hasn't quite gone flush with the line art. If we increase the growth to 2 pixels, then it goes nicely under the lines. The other settings to check are these layer settings. This sets whether you want the fill to apply to only the layer you're on, or across all layers, which will include your line art. You can see what happens if I select the current layer only, it fills the whole screen. That's because the layer I clicked on is empty, there's no border lines to stop the color going everywhere. To keep it within the ink lines, I need to apply the bucket to look at all the layers, and it will then confine itself to the lines on the ink layer. Another way to quickly add color is to use the color mask tool. You will want to use this on the ink layer, not on a separate layer like the previous 2 methods. That's because it creates its own mask layer to add color, and if you use it on an empty layer, it will go there's nothing on this layer to color. So select the tool and click on the ink layer. Your line art will go fuzzy. Head over to your color wheel and select the first color. Scribble briefly in the section or sections you want that color to be in. Assuming you want the background or other areas not to be filled in also, you will need to tell the mask that there are sections you want to leave blank or transparent. Choose any random color for this and mark those areas. Go into Tool Options and select the color you've chosen for the transparent areas, then click the Transparent button. This tells the mask tool that you don't want to see any color in those areas and to leave it see-through. You'll see a line through the box now to say that this color won't be seen. When you've selected all your colors and areas, click on the Update button and it will fill with color. Give it a second to load. You can now see that it has filled the colors you want and left out the color you told it to. At this point, you can still see the lines you made because you're still in editing mode. You can change and add colors and see where you've selected. To take away your transparency section lines, click on Remove. But don't worry, if you don't click this, they will still disappear when you tell it you're finished editing. When you've finished and want to see the final result, uncheck the box which says Edit Keystrokes. So let's see how this works on Chun-Li. Okay, now we've seen how that works, let's see how to do it all with the bucket tool. I find it handy sometimes to put a vivid color in the background so you can easily spot any bits you've missed. Now, if there are any gaps in your line art and it doesn't make a closed shape, then, like I said earlier, the color will escape through the gap and fill the rest of the layer. So if this happens, go and check your lines and close any gaps. After you've filled the majority with the bucket, you can use a brush to fill in the missing bits and small areas. Part 5, Shading and Alpha Lock. In this section, I will show you how to do some basic easy shading and how to make it apply only to the bits you've already colored in. To do this, we need to put all the colored layers into a group. To make your group, right-click, go to Group and Quick Group. The layer you clicked on is now inside this new group. I like to rename the whole group so I know what's in there. To do this, double-click on it. I will change this layer called Color to Flats. These two new layers I added inside the group will be for shading and light. To ensure they only apply to the existing color which is on the layer below, click on the symbol which looks like an A. This is your Alpha Lock. To demonstrate, I will paint a line down the canvas, and with Alpha Lock on, it only shows up on the existing color from the flats layer below. You can toggle the lock on and off, and you will see what it looks like. So, what you might think you need to do, and this is what I did when I first started doing digital art, is pick a shade darker for every color on your picture and shade it that way. Obviously, one shade does not fit all and you have to keep reselecting different colors which match for every color on there. This takes ages and is kind of fiddly. So what you might find easier is to select your shade layer and turn it to multiply. This means that whatever color you are currently on will be added and multiplied to the color you paint over. This means you can swipe your color, in this case a light gray, over all the colors and it will add a uniform shadow. Let's use this method to add shadow onto Chun-Li and see how it looks. Of course, you might want to change the shade for different tones on your drawing. This gray works fine for the darker clothing colors but looks a bit too gray and dark for the skin tones. For your light, there are a few options you can change the layer type to. Lighten is a good one, or luminosity for even brighter tones. This works well on these tights to make them look reflective. Again, one color doesn't always fit all, as we can see that this gray is actually a darker color than the white hair cloth and the boots. You can leave your shading in light hard-edged, or use the cotton bud blender to soften the edges. This bright lighting doesn't really work for her blue outfit unless it was made of shiny latex, but it will do for the sake of a tutorial. I forgot to record this bit, but after you've done your shade and lights, if you think it looks a bit harsh, too light or dark, you can always lower the opacity of the layer until you get an intensity which looks better. Part 6. Changing line art color. Okay, so now we know how to put on shading and light. Let's move on to how to change the color of the line art if you don't want it to remain black. So, much like how we created a group for the color with the original flats on one layer, and layers above which were locked to alpha to only show up on the flats, we're going to do the same for the line art inking. Right-click on the ink layer and create a new group. Add a new layer which is inside the group and above the ink layer. If you are already on the ink layer, the new layer will automatically be created just on top of whatever layer you currently have selected. I'm going to rename this group Ink, and the new layer is Ink Color so I don't get confused about what all the layers are for. Now when we click on Alpha Lock on this layer, it will only show up over the layer below, which is the line art. Pick whatever color you want. It can be the same color as what's right next to it, or a few shades darker, and paint over the ink. Because it's locked to the ink layer below, you don't have to worry about precisely matching the size and position of the ink or making a mess. If you decide that whatever color you've used doesn't look how you want, then just paint over it again. Overlay. Now we've done our lines, flats, and shading. There is another thing you can do for overall lighting effect, and that is use an overlay. This is particularly good for more natural-looking lighting and colored light. I am going to add a new layer over the top of everything. Make sure it's not in any existing groups, but on the very top, and set the layer type to overlay. What this does is to blend whatever you put in this layer into the below picture. This works well with patterns, textures, or overall lighting. For example, I will show you the difference between putting on this purple color when the layer is set to normal, and how it changes to integrate with the existing picture when set to overlay. This is a bit extreme, so you can always lower the opacity of the layer, or choose a less aggressive color and/or brush. So let's get rid of this garish lighting, and use an airbrush brush to add more subtle lighting. I will keep with the purple so you can see what it looks like and well pretend Chun-Li is standing right under a purple neon sign. Now let's say she's got two sources of light, this purple, and then this beige color. What about standing under a green neon light? Oh goodness, not a good look. But the point is, instead of having to try and figure out what the picture would look like being the colors it is and with a green light on them, you can let the computer do the work and just add a green overlay. So let's get rid of that all and put some more general lighting on her. A warm bright sunlight, and then a darker purple shadow. I am softening all the edges to blend it in better as I used a hard-edged brush. So, even though we've already put on shade and light, here we can see the difference to putting on the colored overlay. So hey race, what we've done. We've got our sketch, the line art, flats, shade, light, ink color, and overlay. Of course, you don't have to do all those steps every time you do a drawing, but I think those are the most used and useful techniques that I use when creating a cartoon-like drawing. Thanks for watching. If you have questions, please do let me know in the comments.